Hello, this is Primal JQuay, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of news that has recently come up about a game that I've seen me do a little bit of a demo of. I am, of course, talking about Bloodstained Ritual of the Night. That game that started off as a Kickstarter project headed by Koji Igarashi, himself the father of, I suppose you can call them Metroidvanias if you want, but I'll call them Igavanias. But essentially, he was involved with Castlevania pretty much from the start, really. So a couple of developments have come up with that in the latest update that he did, and it was to announce that the game is delayed again, because there was actually an announcement pretty much close to the same time in 2016 that it was going to be released in 2018, this year. With this announcement, he said that it will be delayed even further into 2019. Again, no firm date as to whether it will be early 2019 or late 2019. They just said 2019. The reason put forward for the delay was as a result of the feedback from the backer demo, of which there was quite a bit, I'd imagine, because even though, as far as I'm concerned, that the gameplay was solid, barring a few glitches here and there are other issues that needed to be cleaned up. As I said before, obviously the lip sync and sort of like the lip rigging was a bit dodgy, versus things like the lighting in certain areas didn't look particularly right. The textures looked kind of bland and stuff like that. There are other few sort of more obvious visual issues there, but there were more developmental things more than anything else. So just things that needed to be finished off, like some of the mapping was a bit warped, as you could have known, as you've seen when you sort of break the wall or when you walk through rocky areas like that. So there was obviously that to work on, and also don't forget that obviously they were pretty much working on getting the demo out, which there was a demo before, but it was literally only the galleon. The other areas that they kind of worked on with this demo probably done already, but then they released it with this demo, and there are stuff as well, like the voice acting and so on and such. Obviously, from that point of view, there's a heck of a lot of feedback to go through, and possibly a whole bunch of other features to be put in the game, and the existing features to be tweaked. Also, a few inconsistencies with certain parts of the UI, which I didn't actually go into in my demo because I wasn't really paying that much attention to it. Although you probably knowing that there was some things I was kind of looking for. It wasn't made that obvious when the quest was complete. Barring all that, there was quite a few other things, probably mostly to do with aesthetics and a few tweaks in gameplay and so on and such. So there seems to be a lot of work to be done there. With that, it delayed it to 2019, but like I said, they didn't actually give a firm date about that. What do I personally think of that? Fine, go ahead. We need, obviously, the game, as good as it is already. I personally think, as far as like the gameplay is concerned, it's solid. If you can make it even better, great. What's the point of doing, the same thing again if it's just going to match the standards that was there before? Certainly needs to support it. Another thing that seems to have come out of that is that Inti Creates, who was the developer when the project started, seems to have come at a point where they could go as far as they could with the project, and actually handed it over to 505 Games, who are now taking over development. Obviously still being headed by Koji Igarashi. And with that, there's obviously handover time as well to get, all the assets over, to get them up to speed with where they are in the project so far, and all of that kind of stuff. So there was that to work through, to getting a demo out, and that's obviously continues throughout the rest of the project. As long as they get their teeth into it and are able to implement those ideas and give it a good, decent polishing and scrubbing, and delivering a nice shiny new game that works, isn't buggy, and is all together a very well decent polished experience, I don't mind that at all. Of course, we were kind of reminded of a quote by a certain developer or a certain game designer who said, a good game is delayed, but a bad game, a bad rushed game is bad forever, or something like that. And I think, the same would, or should I say could, because that old adage, it doesn't always ring true all the time. You can forever. And there's the risk of that, of running into kind of like project burnout and feature creep and all of that kind of other stuff that you kind of need to watch out for. So hopefully it doesn't end up falling into that trap, and 2019, whenever it gets released, a good game comes out of it for most platforms, except, and this is the next part of the news, the PlayStation Vita version won't be coming because that's been cancelled. And the reason they cited for that was because, one, Sony has essentially dropped manufacture and support for the Vita. They've stopped manufacturing the cartridges, even though they could obviously release it digitally. Apparently, Sony are also in the future, around 2019, going to be stopping a couple of PSN services linked to the Vita. Now, I know a lot of people actually kind of did a little bit more investigation into that and found that it wasn't all the services they were stopping, it was just some of the services, and one of them, in case of the Vita, was to essentially they're stopping the free game every month for PlayStation Plus. As far as they're concerned, that doesn't stop a digital version of the game coming out for the platform, because, as you know, the PSP, you might not know this, but I might as well tell you, with the PSP you can actually still purchase games for it from the PlayStation Network. You just can't do it through the PSP itself because they've essentially cut off that service. There used to be a storefront on the PSP for PSN. There isn't anymore. They shut that down ages ago, way back in March 2016. But even with that, you can actually still purchase games from PSN and download them onto your PSP. It's just not as straightforward as it would be if you did it from the device itself. So there are essentially questions to be asked there. Also, in terms of like the cartridges, they're more talking about cartridges manufactured in the West. That's going to be stopped. In Asia, they're apparently still making them, but I would say that in that case there may be other costs involved in terms of like customs and that sort of thing to be able to deal with. Plus, it is cartridges we're talking about here, and the Kickstarter pledges and stretch goals pretty much include a physical release a lot of people are just asking, well, fine, well, we won't have the physical edition, but you can still release it digitally. And here's the thing, they could, but I think they may not have actually said that straight out of the bat. But there is obviously another thing that you kind of have to understand here, and that is, yes, it's a Kickstarter project, and Iwata, and Igarashi is doing it seemingly out of the goodness of his own heart, and he wants to get Igavania, right again for all the people who are still probably pissed off at Konami for dropping it like a rock like they did in a lot of their other franchises. But at the end of the day, even with that, they've got a publisher. The publisher probably still has shareholders to answer to. The developers themselves probably still have shareholders to answer to, and the banks and all of that kind of. They're essentially they're a business, and they need to make profit, and they need to make some money back from that. So even if possibly able to make enough of that from the Kickstarter funds to fund physical releases for the backers, they probably might not be able to justify doing that for general release. And even if they did release it digitally, I would say that they still need to expect some kind of a return of investment from that. And because the Vita is winding down, certainly in the West, not so much in Japan. I mean, it is winding down in Japan as well, obviously. It's because now Sony is treating it like a legacy device. They're not really developing for it much anymore. There's a couple of third parties who are still making Vita games, but not as much now. It's kind of in sort of end of life sales at the moment in time. And really, I think a lot of the interest in Bloodstained really is coming from the West. And as we all know, the Vita hasn't done well in the West at all. I don't think for a moment that it's just literally just because of the fact that they don't want to invest in the Vita anymore. In fact, like I said in an update way back when I first talked about this, they were betting kind of big on this. They actually wanted to port the Unreal 4 engine to the Vita to get this game running on it, which that's a pretty big investment. That's some dedication for you. They actually wanted to do that. They also wanted to do that with the Wii U version, which, as you know, that got canned. That was quite easy to do because the Wii U did even worse than the Vita and just wasn't being supported at all. Plus, the Switch was coming out at that time, so it was an easy decision to make just to bring it to the Switch. Whereas with the Vita, things were kind of unclear. It was very unclear as to what Sony were doing in terms of like support. Then they came up with the whole kind of legacy support thing, which was a big sign that they just weren't interested in supporting it anymore. Even with that though, like I said before, Japanese developers and publishers were still making games for it. I think, it was only up until the point where Sony said we'll start to drop some digital services and stop manufacturing cartridges in certain places that probably swung it, Plus, again, with this delay and with the feedback from the backer demo, it comes back to that whole kind of time is money sort of thing. They still need to make the games for the four platforms, for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. So losing a platform makes it easier for them to finish the game. with that, it's come to the point where they can kind of drop with amateur games in terms of porting the Unreal Engine 4 over to the Vita. So, like I said, it's a shame, really, but unfortunately, that's just business, really. What I would like to say is, if you do want a portable Egomania to play, get it on the Switch when it comes out. I like to say that it's a very capable machine. It's shown how very capable it is. It runs Unreal Engine 4 natively, so in terms of performance, that would be a issue in terms of image quality and that as well. You've got proper analog D-pads, although in this sort of game, I think the digital D-pad is a bit more important, in which case I'm not sure if I'd want to sort of recommend the Switch knowing that the D-pad on that one is like, but then in the other hand, you can get attachments for that to actually have a proper D-pad, 1, and 2 is the Pro Controller, which are options out there. Like I said, I'd like to say, if you can't get it for Vita, then get it for the Switch, but I can understand that there are reasons why people probably wouldn't want to do so. One of those things is that, for starters, the Switch is portable. You throw it in your bag, you can pull it out your bag or whatever, and blah blah blah. But it's not really a pocket-sized device, unless you have huge coat pockets like I do, or those really baggy jeans that you can get massive pockets for. But even then, I'm not sure if it'll be able to fit all the way in. But there's that. That's why, like I was saying in my last news reaction type thing, that a 3DS would still be viable for that kind of market. And looking on the other side of things, there's affordability. People invested and bought a Vita probably won't have money to buy a Switch, especially at the price it is now, unless there's a price drop further down the line that may come either this holiday season or before then. Who knows? Or if there's a newer sort of mini Switch Mini. A lot of people talk about Switch Mini being an option, being a smaller pocketable Switch might be a thing, but we don't know that. It doesn't actually exist. So in terms of options there, the only option that Vita owners really have at this point is, if they have a PlayStation 4 already, they can do it through Remote Play. And that's about it. So I can kind of understand why they're really upset about that. Like I said, the Switch is an option, but that's completely up to them if they want to jump on to that platform or not. And for this, it is really damning because I know a lot of Vita owners are really passionate about the system and think it's absolutely fantastic and should get more games. Unfortunately, Sony doesn't seem to think so. So honestly, as far as I'm concerned, it's on them. But what can you do about that? So yeah, that's my sort of reactions to the whole thing. The delay, it's unfortunate, but after the backer demo and the changeover of development team, I think it was kind of inevitable and somewhat necessary to deliver, a polished product at the end of the day. And as for the Vita version, it's again, it's unfortunate, but unfortunately, it's business. That's just how it is. I do want to say one more thing though. A lot of people are comparing this to Mighty Number 9, and this seems to have been permeated through almost all way through the product, with with each update, with each demo release, or the backer demo and such like that. People are still comparing it to Mighty Number 9. They're doing it so much. You could also make a new Olympic sport called False Equivalence, because Mighty Number 9, the project from that, I'm not going to say it was doomed from the start. It was very promising when it first came out, And obviously when they show like demos of that, it didn't look particularly that well polished, and obviously there were rightful concerns about that. But after that, there was lack of transparency. They started doing all this other stuff like Red Ash or whatever it was called, that sort of came out of nowhere and no one asked for. When it was finally released after that infamous trailer that had a lot of people crying like blah 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 blah, it was beyond recovery, and the game turned out just not to be that particularly great. They just went stum on it, and people are still wondering what the heck happened to the 3DS and Vita version of it. Nothing's been heard about that at all yet. Whereas with this project, they've kept us updated. They've been pretty much candid and transparent about most things. Not going to say everything, but most things. In terms of like the Wii U cancellation, they straight out said that was because the Switch was coming out, and that kind of assured us. And we didn't even have to do anything in terms of like Kickstarter package. I'll have to remember what these bloody things are called now, but we didn't have to do anything with that. It just automatically went to Switch because that's what they assumed that most people were actually going to get, and they were right in that regard. Although I still haven't got one yet. And, in terms of like the delays, yeah, they said they were delayed, but they straight out said that there was going to be delays. They didn't stay stum about it, and they kept us updated with, like I said, most things. Not everything, because like I said before, in terms of some of the network services at Sony being canned, we don't know what those are, and it doesn't seem to be a case in the Vita version not being digitally distributed, while the physical version is just dropped and pledges are adjusted for that. But like I said, with most other things, they've been very straight up with us, so I'm actually happy with that and confident that we'll get a pretty damn good game at the end of this. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that. If any of you guys have either backed the project or are looking very closely at it and obviously want to get the game, tell me what you think of this recent development. Do you think the delay is good? Do you think it's bad and will end up going into development hell and all that, feature creep and so on and such? What do you think of the Vita version being cancelled? Would you get it on Switch instead, or do you just wait for the PlayStation 4 to come out and you can remote play it if you have a PS4 to hook it up with? Let me know all of that in the comments. And what do you think the game will turn out to be? Do you think it'll be a really good return to Igavania, or do you just think it'll be another mighty number 9? And what are the reasons for that, please? So that's what I've got to say about that, and there might be more news. I know I'm very selective about these things, but that's just me, that's just how I'm running this channel. I'm not covering everything because that would just drive me insane, especially when I've been really busy over these past few weeks, and with everything else I'm sort of like taking it easy with these stuff. So if anything interests me, I will post it. Until then, thanks for watching or listening or whatever you're going to be doing, and keep on playing, folks.